My husband was in the shower when I found the diary, not in some poetic movie-like way either. I found it because his phone would not stop buzzing on the bathroom counter. The bathroom mirror was fogged white, and I was digging through the hall closet for a clean towel when a black notebook slid out from the pocket of his old winter coat and hit the floor hard enough to make me jump. I almost put it back. Then I saw his handwriting on the first page. If anything happens to me, Naomi deserves the truth. Lily deserves more than stolen hours and half a father. I read that line 3 times before my brain accepted the words, Naomi. Lily. More than stolen hours. Half a father. My husband Adrian had never once mentioned a Naomi. We had no daughter named Lily. We had been married for 9 years, and in that single sentence my whole life tilted so violently I had to grab the doorframe to stay standing. But that wasn't the worst part. I flipped to the next page with fingers so numb I could barely separate the paper. The entry was dated 4 months earlier. Lily cried when I left tonight. She asked why I sleep at the other house. Naomi looked at me like she already knew I was lying again. The other house. Not our house. The other house. I could hear the shower still running. Water. Steam. The small ordinary sound of a man washing shampoo out of his hair while his wife discovered he belonged somewhere else. I kept turning pages. Christmas morning at Naomi's apartment. Lily's 6th birthday at the aquarium. A broken lamp in a kitchen I had never seen. A fever at 2 in the morning. Tiny details. Real details. The kind only a man who lived a life would know. And not once, not one single time did he write my name. Not Claire. Not my wife. Not even she. I was not in his private world at all, and then everything changed. By the time Adrian came out of the bathroom with damp hair and a towel around his neck, I had shoved the diary under a stack of bedsheets and forced my face into something calm. My heart was beating so hard I thought he might hear it. "You okay?" he asked. He said it the same way he always did lately. Casual. Half looking at me, half looking at his phone. Like concern had become a habit instead of a feeling. "Yeah," I said. "Why? You look pale." I wanted to scream, because I just found proof that you were someone else when I'm not looking. Instead I shrugged and said I was tired. He kissed my forehead. A small, practiced kiss. The kind that used to make me feel safe, that almost destroyed me more than the diary did, because the truth is, if you had asked me 6 months earlier whether my marriage was happy, I would have said yes, and then maybe hesitated. If you had asked me 3 months earlier, I would have said we were going through a hard season. If you had asked me 1 hour before I opened that notebook, I would have defended him. That's the humiliating part no one talks about. Betrayal rarely starts with obvious monsters. It starts with excuses, with you loving someone enough to explain away every crack until the whole ceiling falls on your head. Adrian and I met when I was 27 and still believe that steady meant safe. He was funny then. Warm. The kind of man who remembered exactly how I took my coffee and reached for my hand in parking lots. I had lost my father a year before, and grief made me quiet in a way that scared people. Adrian didn't seem scared. He acted like he understood silence. Like he could sit inside it with me. I thought that was love. We built a life that looked solid from the outside, a narrow blue house with white shutters, Sunday grocery runs, shared passwords, plans for children. He worked in property renovation, and I worked at a physical therapy clinic until our first pregnancy ended at 11 weeks. After that, everything became divided into before and after. Before, he came home early and touched the small of my back when he passed me in the kitchen. After, he started saying work was crazy. Before, we laughed in bed. After, he slept turned away from me. I blamed grief. I blamed my body. I blamed the strange cold space loss creates inside a marriage. When the second pregnancy never came, I blamed that too. But I didn't know what was coming next. The diary made old memories vicious. All those nights, he said a contractor kept him late. All those Saturdays, he said he had to check a property before closing. The Christmas morning 3 years ago when he showed up at noon with cinnamon on his sweater and said a tenant had locked herself out. The anniversary dinner he canceled because a pipe burst downtown. The weekend he claimed he was in Cincinnati for a supplier issue and came back with a stuffed bunny for our future baby. I sat on the edge of our bed that night after he fell asleep and read until sunrise. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Not because the entries were romantic. They weren't. There were no love poems to Naomi. No dramatic declarations. That would have almost been easier. Instead, it was domestic. Intimate. Lived in. Lily likes the crust cut off. Naomi's landlord finally fixed the heater. I promised I'd be there for school pickup Friday. There was tenderness for them. For me, there was nothing. I wasn't the woman he loved in secret. I was the silence between his real memories. That hurt in a way I can still barely explain. Cheating is one kind of pain. Being erased is another. To discover that the man sleeping beside you had an inner life where you didn't even qualify as a sentence. It made me feel less like a wife and more like furniture. By morning, I had cried so hard my eyelids were swollen. Adrian noticed over breakfast. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. I watched him spread jam on toast with those same careful hands that had written about another child's fever, another woman's kitchen, another home. He looked tired. Human. Familiar. That almost made me doubt myself for one insane second, like maybe I had misunderstood everything. Then his phone lit up with a message. He flipped it face down so fast it might as well have been a confession. I smiled. Just didn't sleep well. He nodded and left for work. The second the front door shut, I unlocked his desk drawer with the tiny spare key from our junk bowl. I had never done that before. 9 years of marriage, and I had never felt the need. Inside were receipts, property folders, pens, spare chargers, and a bank envelope with statements from an account I had never seen. The balance was low, but money moved through it constantly. Rent payments, grocery charges, children's clothing store purchases, an aquarium membership. My vision blurred. I kept digging and found a folded sheet from a flower shop. Delivery address, Maple Crest Apartments, Unit 3B. My hand shook so badly I dropped it. What I saw next shocked me even more. Tucked behind the statements was a photocopy of our mortgage refinancing paperwork. We had talked about refinancing once, months ago, but never followed through because I said I wanted to wait. My signature was on the page anyway. Or something very close to my signature. I stared at it until nausea rolled through me. By then, the problem was no longer just betrayal. It was money. My grandmother had left me that house. It was the only inheritance I had. The only thing in my life that felt rooted. Adrian knew what it meant to me. If he had touched it, if he had forged anything, then this wasn't an affair. This was something colder. That afternoon I called the bank from my car in a grocery store parking lot, pretending to ask about our existing mortgage. The woman on the phone was polite until I asked about pending changes. "Ma'am, I can only discuss documents with both borrowers present. There are new documents?" A pause. "I would recommend visiting your branch directly." My mouth went dry. I drove to Maple Crest instead. It was a beige apartment building on the edge of town near the old library, the kind of place you don't notice unless you already know it's there. I sat across the street gripping the steering wheel while rain tapped against my windshield. I told myself I just needed confirmation. A face. A glimpse. Something to prove I wasn't losing my mind. At 4:12, Adrian's truck pulled into the lot. I stopped breathing. He got out carrying a paper bag and a pink backpack. A little girl with 2 braids burst through the front door before he even reached it. She threw herself at his legs yelling, "Daddy!" He laughed. He laughed. The sound reached me through the rain and shattered something final inside my chest. A woman came to the doorway a second later. Dark hair pulled back. Gray sweater. Pretty in a tired, real way. She kissed him on the cheek like she had every right to. Then she took the paper bag from his hand while the little girl tugged him inside. He did not look trapped. He did not look confused. He looked home. But that wasn't the end of it. I don't remember driving away. I only remember pulling into a church parking lot 2 miles later and vomiting beside my car. Then I sat in the front seat with my forehead against the wheel and made the kind of sounds people make when they have no pride left. That night, Adrian came home at 9:40 and said traffic was bad. He asked if I'd eaten. He touched my shoulder. I almost laughed at the ugliness of it. "You smell like tomato sauce," I said before I could stop myself. He froze for half a second. Just half. Then he smiled. "Client meeting at an Italian place." I looked him right in the face and realized he could lie without flinching. Something hardened in me then. Not strength yet. Not courage. Just a cold, quiet place where panic stopped running the room. I said, "You should shower. Long day." He smiled again, relieved, and went upstairs. I took the diary from the linen closet and hid it in the trunk of my car. The next week became a performance. I made coffee. I folded laundry. I answered his small talk. I watched him move through our house like he still owned the truth. Meanwhile, I copied every page of the diary during my lunch breaks at the clinic and stored the scans in a secret email account. I went to the bank branch alone and learned that a home equity loan application was in process using both our names. Not finalized yet. Friday was the last review date. Friday. If I had waited much longer, he could have buried me in debt before I even found the bottom of his lies. I also learned the signature on the preliminary form appeared consistent with mine. I would need to dispute it formally. The banker said it carefully, with the kind of measured concern people use when they suspect domestic disaster, but don't want to say it out loud. When I got back to my car, I cried for exactly 60 seconds. Then I wiped my face and called the number listed on the flower receipt. A woman answered on the third ring. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, distracted, almost familiar from the doorway across the street. I hung up. Cowardly, maybe. But hearing her voice made the whole thing unbearably real. And I still didn't know whether she knew about me. That question gnawed at me more than I expected. If she knew, she was part of the betrayal. If she didn't, then there were two women standing in the same fire, each thinking the other one lit it. I needed to know which was true. 3 days later, I got my chance. Adrian left his tablet on the kitchen island while he carried boxes to the garage. A message popped up across the screen. "Naomi, Lily made you a picture. She wants you here Friday. Don't break this promise too." I took a photo before he came back inside. Friday. Same day as the loan review. I barely made it through work. I kept thinking about "don't break this promise too." That was not the message of a woman happily sharing a man. That was the message of someone tired of being disappointed. So after work, instead of going home, I drove to Maple Crest with the copy pages of the diary in my bag and dread like a fever under my skin. I stood outside Unit 3B for a full minute before knocking. The woman from the doorway opened it. Up close, she looked younger than I first thought, maybe 32. Beautiful in the exhausted way mothers often are, hair escaping her ponytail, no makeup, a tiny marker stain on one wrist. Behind her, I could hear a cartoon and a child humming. "Yes?" My mouth went dry. Every speech I had planned vanished. I said, "we need to talk about Adrian." Her whole face changed. Not guilt, not defensiveness, fear. And then everything changed. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "How do you know him?" she asked carefully. I stared at her left hand. There was a ring on it, not costume jewelry, not casual, a wedding band. The hallway felt suddenly too narrow for air. "I'm Claire," I said. "I'm his wife." For one full second, she didn't move at all. Then she laughed once, a tiny, disbelieving sound, like her body rejected the sentence before her mind could. "No," she whispered. I reached into my bag with shaking fingers and pulled out my driver's license, then a photo from my wallet, Adrian and me at my cousin's wedding last spring. His hand around my waist, my head on his shoulder. Date stamped at the bottom by the photographer. Naomi looked at the photo, looked at me, looked back at the photo. Her face drained of color so fast, I thought she might faint. "He told me," she said, and stopped. Her lips were trembling. He told me his divorce was final years ago. I couldn't speak. She opened the door and let me in. There were children's drawings on the refrigerator, a small table by the window, 2 tiny shoes by the couch. A framed courthouse wedding picture sat on a shelf near the television, Naomi in a cream dress, Adrian in a navy suit, his hand resting possessively on her back. The date was 3 years after our marriage. My knees almost gave out. Willie looked up from the rug with a coloring book in her lap. She had Adrian's eyes. That hit me with a strange, cruel softness. She was innocent, just a little girl with missing front teeth and purple socks, sitting in the ruins of choices she didn't make. "Mommy?" she asked. Naomi swallowed hard. "Sweetheart, go color in your room for a little bit." Lily frowned but obeyed. The second her bedroom door shut, Naomi turned to me and said, "Show me everything." So I did. I showed her the diary pages, the bank paperwork, the flower receipt. I watched her sit down slowly, like each new piece of evidence took weight from her bones. She read in silence for a long time. When she reached the entry about balancing both houses until the loan clears, she made a sound I will never forget, half sob, half anger. "I gave him my savings," she said. "He said he was buying us a small place. Something stable for Lily." I felt cold all over. "He's using my house for a loan." She shut her eyes. Oh my God. We were quiet for several seconds. 2 strangers surrounded by the proof of the same man. Then Naomi looked at me and said the sentence that shifted everything. "I didn't know about you. And if you didn't come here today, I would have kept not knowing until he destroyed us both." That was the moment she stopped being the other woman in my mind. She became the other victim. But the lies didn't stop there. We spent the next 2 hours comparing timelines while Lily watched cartoons with headphones on. It was horrible and bizarre and strangely clarifying. Every work trip he took with me matched a property visit or late closing with her. Every holiday excuse had a mirror image. On nights he slept at my house, he told Naomi he was handling emergency plumbing at one of his rentals. When he stayed there, he told me he was out of town. He had built 2 entire realities out of scheduling and nerve. Naomi met him 5 years earlier at a grief support group. Her husband had died in a motorcycle accident when Lily was still a baby. Adrian told her he was divorced and emotionally wrecked by the breakup. He said he understood loneliness. He said he admired how strong she was. I nearly laughed when she said that, not because it was funny, but because that was almost word for word how he had once spoken to me after my father died. He had patterns. That realization made my skin crawl. Naomi stood, went to a kitchen drawer, and brought back a folder of financial papers. Inside were transfers from her account to Adrian's business. Temporary loans, he called them. Investment in a project. Down payment for their future house. It added up to nearly $40,000. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. "Why would you trust him with that much?" She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Probably for the same reason you trusted him with your name." That shut me up. She was right. Shame looks stupid when someone else is holding the same kind. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing: crying separately was exactly how men like Adrian stayed powerful, so we stopped doing that. The first person we called was a lawyer Naomi knew from church, an older woman named Denise, with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She listened without interrupting, then asked us to send copies of everything and told us not to confront Adrian yet. "Men who build double lives don't surrender when cornered," she said. "They rewrite, manipulate, and escalate. Get evidence first." Escalate. The word sat badly in my chest, but she was right. That night I went home and acted normal again. Adrian was in a good mood, which almost made me sick. He ordered Thai food, talked about paint costs, asked if I wanted to watch a movie. At one point he came behind me while I loaded the dishwasher and wrapped his arms around my waist. "I've missed you," he murmured. I went still. not because I believed him, because I finally understood the performance. His affection rose whenever he sensed distance, not because he loved me, but because he needed control back. I turned and smiled just enough. I've just been tired. He searched my face. For a second, I thought he knew. Then he kissed my forehead and let go. The next morning, I checked his briefcase before he woke up. Inside, I found a notary appointment card for Friday at 5:30 p.m. Same day Lily expected him. Same day the loan would clear. Same day, apparently, he planned to finish bleeding us both. I took a photo and texted Naomi. Her reply came instantly. He told Lily he'd be there for her school recital at 6. I stared at the message until rage steadied into something cleaner. He wasn't even choosing between us. He was simply overbooking lies. And then, everything changed again. Wednesday night, Adrian came home earlier than usual and found me sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of mail. One envelope had the bank logo on it. I had opened it on purpose and left it visible. His eyes locked on it immediately. "What's that?" he asked. "Just mortgage stuff." He walked closer. Too close. "Did you call the bank?" My pulse kicked hard, but I kept my face blank. "Why would I?" He smiled, but it was thin. "No reason." He reached for the envelope. I put my hand on it first. The room went very quiet. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something in his face that I had only felt before. Calculation stripped of charm. It was chilling, like catching the actor backstage with his costume off. "Claire," he said softly, "if there's something you want to ask me, ask." There it was. The invitation to doubt myself, to enter his version of reality where he controlled the language. I pulled my hand away. Nothing to ask. He held my gaze another second, then nodded once and took the envelope. When he left the room, my whole body started shaking. A minute later, my phone buzzed. "Naomi, he just texted me asking if anyone strange has come by. I think he knows something." That was the first moment fear became physical. Not sadness, not heartbreak, fear. Because a lying man is one thing. A cornered lying man is another. Denise told us to speed everything up. She filed an emergency dispute on the loan paperwork, contacted the bank's fraud department, and advised Naomi to gather all original transfer records. She also told us to find out whether Adrian had done this before. "If he's this organized," she said, "you're probably not the first." That possibility hadn't fully hit me until then. Naomi had a name, Tessa. Adrian's younger sister. I had met her only twice in 9 years because he was not close with family. That should have been a warning. It was always someone else's fault. His mother was dramatic, his sister was unstable, his father was dead and complicated. Every bridge in his life seemed burned by other hands. I believed that too. Naomi found Tessa through social media and sent one message: "We need help. It's about Adrian and it's serious." Tessa called within 20 minutes. She met us the next afternoon at a diner off Route 7. Short hair, leather jacket, suspicious eyes. The kind of woman who looked like disappointment had taught her not to waste time. She listened while we told her everything. She didn't even look surprised until we mentioned the diary. "He kept one again?" she said quietly. My skin prickled. "Again?" Tessa leaned back in the booth and rubbed her forehead. "When we were teenagers, Adrian used to write everything down. People's habits, weak spots, what they liked hearing. Dad called it strategy. I called it creepy." Naomi and I exchanged a look. Tessa went on. "Our father was a scammer. Small stuff mostly. Fake investments, borrowed identities, romantic lies. Adrian hated him out loud, but privately, he studied him." I felt sick. "You think he learned this?" Naomi asked. Tessa gave a bitter laugh. "I think he perfected it." What she told us next was worse. About a year before Adrian met me, he had lived with a woman in Dayton for almost 8 months while helping with her late mother's estate. Tessa didn't know the full story because Adrian vanished before it exploded, but she remembered whispered family calls about missing money and forged papers. Their mother begged Tessa to stay out of it. Tessa cut contact soon after. I should have warned somebody, she said. I just never knew who. But that wasn't the biggest twist. Before we left the diner, Tessa slid a storage key across the table. He rents a unit on the south side under his middle name. I found a receipt years ago. If he's hiding records, they'll be there. My hand hovered over the key like it might burn me. That night, after Adrian told me he'd be working late, Naomi, Tessa, and I drove to the storage facility together. My stomach twisted the whole way. Part of me still hoped we'd find boring paperwork, nothing dramatic, nothing that could make the last decade feel completely fake. The unit door groaned when Tessa rolled it up. Inside were plastic bins, old tools, a lamp, folded chairs, a suitcase, and 3 banker's boxes labeled with years. Adrian had archived himself. I opened the first box and found copies of IDs, loan applications, burner phone packaging, prepaid debit cards, and folders with women's names on them. Women. Plural. My knees weakened. There was one with my name, one with Naomi's, one with a woman named Elise, one with another named Marjorie. Some were thick, some thin, but each held notes, printouts, timelines, financial details, personal details. It was not chaos, it was a system. What I saw next shattered the last part of me, still clinging to the idea that our marriage had at least begun honestly. Inside my file was a yellow legal pad page in Adrian's handwriting. Claire Benson, only child, father deceased. Close with grandmother, house likely inherited, needs steadiness, reassurance, family language. Do not push too hard physically after loss. Responds to patience. Big fear, abandonment. I couldn't breathe. It was dated 2 weeks before our first date. 2 weeks. My love story fit on a strategy sheet. Naomi found one for herself too. Naomi Reyes. Widowed. Settlement money. Lonely brace. Widowed. Settlement money. Lonely but guarded. Child creates leverage for hero role. Needs consistency promises. Never mention long-term finances until trust locks. Naomi made a choking sound and dropped the paper like it had cut her. Tessa stood frozen beside us, horrified even though she clearly expected something bad. This was beyond bad. This was method. This was predation dressed in tenderness. I thought the diary had hurt because it erased me. I was wrong. This hurt because it explained me. Every comforting word, every carefully timed act of devotion, every moment he made me feel uniquely seen. It had not come from deep love, it had come from observation. I had not been chosen, I had been profiled, and then everything became brutally clear. The miscarriage, my father's death, Naomi's widowhood, Lily's need for a father. Our most painful moments had not made him gentler, they had made us easier to steer. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and cried harder than I had cried when I saw him with Naomi and Lily. Because betrayal by desire is one thing. Betrayal by design is another kind of evil. Tessa crouched beside me. Claire, I don't know what was real, I whispered. She answered honestly. Maybe some of it was, but not enough. It was a brutal kindness, and I needed it. We photographed everything. Every file. Every signature copy. Every burner phone package. Denise nearly shouted when she saw the images. This is organized fraud, she said. And now we move fast. Friday became our deadline for a different reason. The bank froze the home equity process pending investigation, but Adrian didn't know yet. Denise suggested we let him walk into his own trap. The notary appointment would proceed. Naomi would tell him Lily was heartbroken but understood. I would act distant, tired, compliant. Tessa would coordinate with Denise and a fraud investigator the bank brought in once the documents were reviewed. All I had to do was keep breathing until 5:30. That should have been easy. It wasn't. On Friday morning, Adrian brought me coffee in bed. You've seemed stressed, he said. I thought maybe tonight we could finally sit down and plan our future. Our future. The words were so grotesque I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I took the coffee and said, "That sounds nice." He smiled with visible relief. At noon, Naomi texted me a photo of Lily at school in a tiny blue dress for her recital. My chest tightened. Children always make betrayal uglier because they believe what adults tell them. Lily thought her father might come if she just asked sweetly enough. At 3:15, Adrian called. "Hey," he said warmly, "I may need you to sign a couple of things later. Just routine property paperwork. Nothing major." There it was. The lie arriving exactly on schedule. "Okay," I said. "You trust me, right?" That question. I closed my eyes. I did. Silence. Then he laughed lightly, like I'd made a joke. "See you at home." My hands went cold. I didn't know what was coming next, and for the first time, I was afraid he might choose violence over exposure. Denise told me to have a bag packed in my trunk and not be alone with him once the confrontation began unless help was already nearby. So I packed a bag. Not because I planned to run. Because something in me finally accepted that the man I loved existed mostly in my memories. By 50:20, the living room was spotless. Adrian had changed into a button-down shirt. The notary, a woman in her 50s, named Carol, arrived right on time with a leather folder and a polite smile. She sat at our dining table while Adrian poured wine nobody touched. "Just basic signatures," he said, setting the pages in front of me. "This helps us move forward." My name was already printed in 3 places. I looked at the line. I thought of my grandmother kneading bread in this kitchen. Of the day she handed me the house keys and said, "Never let anyone make you feel lucky to be loved in your own home." At the time I thought she meant, "Choose a good husband." Now I understood she meant something bigger. Adrian slid a pen toward me. "Claire?" I lifted my eyes to his and smiled. "No." The room went silent. Carol blinked. Adrian's expression did not change immediately, but something dangerous flashed beneath it. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not signing a fraudulent loan with a forged preliminary application tied to my inherited house." Carol slowly sat back. Adrian laughed once. "Claire, what are you talking about?" The front door opened behind him. Naomi walked in first. Tessa came right after her. And then Denise. Adrian turned so fast his chair scraped the floor. For the first time since I met him, he actually looked startled. Naomi's face was pale but steady. "You promised Lily you'd come tonight, but I guess fraud fit better in your schedule." He stared at her, then at me, then at Denise. In seconds, I watched him rearrange himself, shock flattening into calm, calm sharpening into strategy. "This is insane," he said softly. "Claire, you went through my things? You're upset, I get that, but whatever she told you, don't," Naomi snapped. He ignored her and focused on me, because that was always his move. Isolate the woman he thought he could still control. "Claire, look at me. You know me." I stood. "No," I said. "I know the file you made before our first date." That landed, a tiny break in the mask. Denise set a folder on a table and opened it 1 page at a time. My profile sheet, Naomi's. Photos from the storage unit. Copies of burner phones. Transfer records. Preliminary loan documents. Carol the notary went white. "What is this?" Adrian said, but his voice had changed. Less husband, more defendant. "This," Denise said, "is enough to stop today's signing, begin fraud proceedings, and interest law enforcement if you say one more stupid thing." He looked at Tessa with pure hatred. "You little traitor." She laughed bitterly. "You don't get to use family words like that." For 1 second I thought he might lunge across the table. Instead he straightened, smoothed his shirt and tried a new face. Wounded, misunderstood, nearly noble. "I can explain all of this," Naomi's voice cracked. "Then explain Lily." Something flickered in his eyes. Not shame. Irritation. That was the moment even the final remnants of my old love died. A guilty man would have looked broken. Adrian looked inconvenienced. But that wasn't the worst thing he said. He exhaled sharply, dropped the performance, and looked at us with a kind of cold disgust. "You both wanted something," he said. "Don't act innocent now." She wanted a husband who made her feel safe. You wanted a father for your kid. I gave you what you needed. I felt my whole body go still. Naomi stared at him like she no longer recognized the species. He went on, almost angry now that no one was applauding his logic. You think people stay because of love? People stay because they get something. Stability, attention, hope. I managed difficult situations. That's all. Difficult situations, I repeated. He looked right at me. You were drowning in grief when I met you. You think anyone else was signing up for that? The room exploded. Naomi slapped him so hard his head snapped sideways. Carol gasped. Tessa swore. Denise stepped between us because I had already started moving, and if she hadn't, I might have done something reckless for the first time in my life. I wanted to claw every false tenderness off his skin. Instead, I stood there shaking while he touched his cheek and actually laughed, as though our pain proved his point. Then a small voice came from the doorway. Daddy? Everyone turned. Lily was standing there in her blue recital dress, clutching one shoe. Naomi had left her with a neighbor, but the neighbor must have brought her over when Naomi stopped answering her phone. I will never forget the confusion on that little girl's face. Adrian softened instantly, like flipping a switch. Hey, Bug. Naomi stepped in front of him. Don't. Lily looked from her mother to Adrian to me and back again. Are we still going? Naomi dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. No, baby, not with him. Lily's mouth trembled. Did I do something bad? That question broke something open in the room that anger alone hadn't touched. Because this was the true cost of men like Adrian, not just the women they lied to. The children who learned confusion before trust. Naomi pulled Lily into her arms and cried into her hair. Adrian took one step forward. Two men entered behind him, plain clothes. Bank fraud investigator and local officer, both arranged by Denise once the evidence cleared threshold. I had known they were waiting outside, but seeing them walk in made everything feel final. Adrian Cole, one of them said, we need to ask you some questions regarding fraudulent financial documentation and identity misrepresentation. For the first time all evening, he looked uncertain. He turned to me, not Naomi, me. Claire, don't do this. Isn't that always how it ends? The man breaks your life and then asks you not to break his consequences. I looked him in the eye and said the truest thing I had said in years. You stopped being my problem the day I learned I was never your person. He opened his mouth, maybe to charm, maybe to threaten, but the officer stepped closer. Adrian's shoulders sagged. The act was over. And then everything changed one last time. The weeks after were ugly, slow, and deeply unglamorous. Fraud investigations are not cinematic. They are paperwork, interviews, signatures, disputed records, timelines, photocopies, waiting rooms, and exhaustion. Naomi and I spent hours retelling the same humiliating facts to different people. Tessa testified about the storage unit. Carol the notary filed a formal statement. Denise became the backbone of our survival. It turned out Adrian had never finalized a legal marriage with Naomi because he used forged divorce paperwork when they applied for the license. The ceremony photo was real. The legal reality was not. With me, the marriage was legal, but everything after became part of a widening criminal case once investigators linked the forged loan documents, fake business accounts, and records connected to at least 2 prior women. I wish I could say that knowledge made me feel instantly better. It didn't. For a while, I couldn't walk through my own kitchen without seeing that yellow legal pad page in my head. Needs steadiness. Big fear, abandonment. He had written my pain down like a recipe. I stopped asking what in our marriage had been real. Denise told me something wise after one long meeting when I broke down in her office. It mattered to you, she said. That means it was real in your body, in your effort, in your hope. His lie does not erase your truth. That sentence saved me more than she probably knew. Naomi and Lily moved in with Naomi's cousin for a while. Then, 3 months later, after the worst of the legal panic settled, Naomi came by my house with a tray of overbaked brownies and asked if I wanted company on the porch. We sat there at sunset without pretending to be okay. Willie chased moths across the yard and shouted every time she caught nothing. Naomi laughed for the first time in months. It was small, but real. I used to be embarrassed by how much I wanted him to be good, she admitted quietly. I looked out at the street. Me too. She shook her head. Not anymore. Now I'm embarrassed he mistook our hope for stupidity. That made me smile. Because that was the shift, wasn't it? He had built his whole life on one ugly assumption. That kindness made women weak. That grief made us easy. That love made us blind forever. He was wrong. Love made us vulnerable, yes. But once the lie had a face, it also made us furious. 6 months later, the house was still mine. That sentence deserves its own breath. The house was still mine. The loan was voided. The forged documents became evidence. Adrian took a plea deal that included fraud charges, restitution orders, and restrictions that kept him far from Naomi and Lily. I didn't celebrate the way movies tell you to celebrate justice. There was no champagne moment. No magical erasure of pain. There was only a deep, steady relief. The kind that arrives when you wake up one morning and realize the air in your own home belongs to you again. I painted the bedroom myself. Tore down the hallway mirror he liked, changed the locks, then the curtains, then the dining table. Tiny acts, sacred acts, the kind that tell your nervous system the danger has passed. Naomi started working at a community center and eventually rented a small duplex nearby. Sometimes Lily spent Saturday mornings with me baking muffins, which felt strange at first and then natural. We never forced some fake sisterhood language onto what happened between us. We just kept showing up. That was enough. As for me, I went back to full-time work. I started therapy. I learned that being deceived doesn't mean you are foolish. It means someone invested energy in distorting your reality. That distinction matters. One buries you in shame. The other hands you back your dignity. A year after I found the diary, I took it out of the evidence box Denise returned once the case closed. I sat at the same kitchen table where he had once tried to get me to sign away my house and read the first line again. If anything happens to me, Naomi deserves the truth. Lily deserves more than stolen hours and half a father. The cruelest thing about that sentence used to be that it didn't mention me. Now I understood something else. It didn't mention him either, not really, because diaries are supposed to tell the truth about who we are when no one is watching. And in his own private pages, Adrian was not a husband, not a father, not even a lover. He was a man managing access, moving people around like furniture, recording emotional weather so he could dress for it properly. That diary did not erase me, it exposed him, and that changed everything. If you've never had your heart broken by a lie that wore your favorite face, let me tell you what healing actually sounds like. It is not dramatic. It sounds like changing the locks without crying. It sounds like laughing one whole minute before realizing you forgot to be afraid. It sounds like saying, "No, that doesn't work for me," and meaning it. It sounds like your own name in your own mouth, no longer waiting for someone else to make it valuable. For a long time, I thought the saddest part of my marriage was that my husband wrote hundreds of pages about his hidden life and never mentioned me once. But I see it differently now. A woman can survive being left out of the wrong story. What destroys her is staying in it after she knows, so I left. I kept the house, I kept the May name, I kept the part of me that still knows how to trust kindness only now. I trust my own first. And the strongest thing I ever did was understand this. If a man can hold your hand for years and still never truly see you, then being absent from his diary is not your shame, it is your warning. And sometimes the greatest gift betrayal gives you is this one brutal, beautiful truth. The moment you realize you were never loved properly is the same moment you become impossible to use again.